Liar. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It's Tuesday, May 23rd, 2023. I knew that 23 repeat was coming up. We mentioned it yesterday. I hope you went out and got that lottery ticket that, I don't know. I guess if you win anything off of that, all we gave you was one number, and we didn't even give you the number. But I guess a good idea would be for you to give 23% of your winnings to me, your favorite charity, or your real favorite charity. Somebody deserving. And failing that, our show would be fantastic. I don't know. We deserve something, right? Sure. Okay. Anyway, early morning for us today. No scrambling at the last minute. I just didn't know what to do with myself for like an hour as we sent the high schooler off for the senior outing for today. So that should be fun and exciting. Looks to be good weather and one of those all day things. And, magically somehow, he found the strength, the vim, the energy to get up and out of bed. Usually it's a struggle starting to wake him up a little bit after 8 o'clock in order to get him out the door so he can catch the bus a little before 9 o'clock. And yet today he had to already be at school at 7:30 or so in order to catch the bus for the big outing. But, fun day planned. It's one thing to get up for a fun-filled day with your friends out at the park versus, another day of school. So you could see how it could happen. But now we know it is possible. I don't know. I'll probably tell him, all right, so this means that you're going to be able to get up and out of bed and get yourself to 8 o'clock classes, because that's the bane of every freshman's existence. They give you those classes. They don't give them to you for a reason. They assign them to the professors who teach classes that freshmen tend to be taking. Anyway, trying to prepare him for the possibility that, life will begin actually earlier. We've had the good fortune to have a rather progressive school system, despite the fact that Loudoun County and its schools are constantly in the news, in ways that make people think that there's some sort of, conservative reactionary, populace really in place here demanding that we set the clock back. We are actually the opposite, and they're fighting a minority and, for the most part, losing battle against that. But anyway, our good folks at our school system have flipped the script and used the latest research that, I guess, guides the idea that school should begin earliest for the youngest students and latest for the oldest students, who tend to either be working as well as making their way through school, or just plain doing the teenage thing and staying up till all hours, and could use that extra hour or so to sleep in the morning. Anyway, it all stands on its head next year when you go off to college. However, I guess it offsets it that you can, be among many who simply roll out of bed and put on sweats and a baseball hat and head to class unshowered. Well, that's the way it is with people. And that's the way the kids do it. And maybe that'll be somewhat different than having to make yourself presentable for high school. Although that's not exactly his favorite pastime, if you know what I mean. Okay. Well, anyway, it is Tuesday. We're awaiting or hoping for everything to go well anyway. For our last segment visit with Joan McCarter, we got to have a check-in order to, in case it doesn't happen for whatever reason, or in case we want to just talk about something else that's more fun. Yes, there's still a debt ceiling crisis. It still looms. It's unsolved. I guess the latest word on it is that there's no word on it. Reuters reports it. They're great. When it comes to there not being any news, you want to read about there not being any news at Reuters. A sponsor of the show is just canceled. They're not a sponsor of the show, but if they had been, that would have ruined it. Biden and McCarthy meeting ends with no deal on debt ceiling. Not surprising, of course. there's really not much there that Biden can offer McCarthy, and McCarthy doesn't speak for anybody in particular because he's got a 1-seat majority and the Republican conference is internally at odds. So he goes because he has a suit and there's a title, and then people say, well, the guy with the suit and the title should meet with the other guy with the suit and the title, and they should talk about this looming problem. And that's the things that people normally do. But when they're not really empowered to do anything about it, well then, what's going to happen? Nothing. So no deal is the news. President Joe Biden and House Speaker Kevin McCarthy could not reach an agreement on Monday on how to raise the U.S. government's $31.4 trillion debt ceiling with just 10 days before a possible default that could sink the U.S. economy, but vowed to keep talking. Good vow, everybody. Now, they could reach an agreement on how to raise the debt ceiling. The answer is Congress would vote to raise the debt ceiling and the president would sign it. Or, actually, quite honestly, I know everybody's trying very hard to blame the president for this, but the president doesn't even have to sign the damn thing. There's really nothing for the president to do. If the Congress passes the thing and the president sits by and watches, it's fine. The debt ceiling is raised. Although, I guess with just 10 days before a possible default, yeah, maybe technically he does have to sign it because it becomes law after 10 days if he doesn't sign it, but also doesn't veto it. And, I guess the debt ceiling could expire. We could hit the debt ceiling. That's the better description for what would happen while the thing is waiting for signature. So, all right, we'll say in this case, the president does have a role. He has to sign it. That's an unusual, situation. I mean, I guess he could not sign it and the Treasury could say, all right, it's not, June 1st, it's June 4th. And then he doesn't sign it, but on June 3rd, it becomes law. You get the idea. I think you know what we're talking about. The Democratic president and the top congressional Republican have struggled to make a deal as McCarthy pressures the White House to agree to spending cuts in the federal budget that Biden considers extreme, and the president pushes new taxes that Republicans have rejected, neither of which are part of raising the debt ceiling. But because they have something to do with money, they've convinced everybody that it's okay to consider them related. They tied them together. Both sides stressed the need to avoid default with a bipartisan deal after Monday evening's meeting, however, and signaled that they'd be talking regularly in the coming days. A source familiar with the situation, that could be you're familiar with the situation, said that the White House negotiators were returning to Capitol Hill on Monday night to resume talks. We reiterated once again that default is off the table and the only way to move forward is in good faith toward a bipartisan agreement, Biden said in a statement after the meeting, which he called productive. That's nice of him to call it that. McCarthy told reporters after over an hour of talks, a whole hour on the entirety of the U.S. and world economy. Golly, that's a, way to put yourself out there, Kevin. After an hour of talks with Biden, that negotiators are, quote, going to get together, work through the night to try to find common ground. That's what you were supposed to do. I believe we can still get there, McCarthy said. He is not willing to consider Biden's plan to cut the deficit by raising taxes on the wealthy and closing tax loopholes for the oil and pharmaceutical industries, he said, and is focused on reducing spending in the 2024 federal budget. Democrats and Republicans have until June 1st, maybe, sorta, kinda, to increase the government's self-borrowing limit or trigger an unprecedented debt default that economists warn could bring on a recession or worse. It's really amazing that they would limit it to that. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen on Monday offered a sobering reminder of how little time is left, saying the earliest estimated default date remains June 1st, and that it is highly likely that Treasury will no longer be able to pay all government obligations by early June if the debt ceiling is not raised. It never helps that there's just nothing definitive to say about these things. But when you're talking about that many dollars, I could see why it's difficult to estimate. Republican Representative Patrick McHenry, who was in the White House meeting, ruled out any partial budget agreement to raise the debt ceiling. No one's going to agree to anything until we have a finalized deal, he said. He said the tone in the Biden meeting was the most positive yet. That's nice of him, I guess. Any deal to raise the limit must pass both chambers of Congress and therefore hinges on bipartisan support. McCarthy's Republicans control the House 222 to 213, while Biden's Democrats hold the Senate 51-49. Okay. I don't know why I keep saying it's a one-seat thing, but it's not, I guess. So, all right. Well, anyway, I don't know why we keep thinking that it is. A failure to lift the debt ceiling would trigger a default that would shake financial markets and drive interest rates higher on everything from car payments to credit cards. I really think it would be considerably worse than that, an actual default. U.S. markets rose on Monday as investors awaited updates on the negotiations. Why not take a couple more days of profit before it all falls apart? And then the profits that you took are worth nothing. But okay, it will take several days to move legislation through Congress, no matter what's in it. If and when Biden and McCarthy come to an agreement, McCarthy said that a deal must be reached this week for it to pass Congress and be signed into law by Biden in time to avoid default. So I guess they'd better get to it. There's a little more. If you want to read it, we might as well remind ourselves of the various bits and pieces in the background. Republicans want discretionary spending cuts, new work requirements for some programs for low-income Americans, and a clawback of COVID-19 aid approved by Congress but not yet spent in exchange for a debt ceiling increase, which is needed to cover the costs of lawmakers' previously approved spending and tax cuts. I know they keep saying it, but people don't really get it, and they need to find a new way of saying the same thing. Democrats want to hold spending steady at this year's levels in 2024. Well, they have agreed to offer that, but they want to increase it. But anyway, while Republicans want to return to 2022 levels next year and cap spending growth in the years ahead. A plan passed by the House last month would cut a wide swath of government spending by 8% next year. All right, sure, whatever. Now, there's a graphic that says how U.S. deficit reduction plans compare. I mean, let's see if we agree with the way it comes out graphically speaking. An estimated 10-year federal budget savings from Democratic President Biden's proposed 2024 budget and Republicans' Limit, Save, Grow Act, LSG, if you want to abbreviate it. And I don't think you can make an acronym out of it. LSG doesn't really work. Let's see. Biden, I don't know. It's garbage to even bother looking at it. Anyway, I guess in terms of savings, I don't know. That's an easy comparison. $3 trillion in savings in the Biden budget compared to $4.8 trillion, $1.8 trillion in extra quote unquote savings. That would be cutting government spending and elimination of various programs by Republicans. And, I guess there's a difference between freezing spending and cutting it back to 2022 levels. Their Republican plan also includes ending the student debt cancellation, repealing energy tax credits, because that'll be awesome for the economy. Everybody loves having the tax credits that they upgraded they installed solar panels in their building or in their home with the expectation that they would get tax assistance to do so. And, what would be great for the economy? Repeal the tax incentives that everybody was counting on, and then they end up stuck paying the full freight of the thing, and lots of other things don't get paid for, and rather than spending that cash in the economy, they hoard it to make up for their losses. Fantastic. Great idea. Wonderful for the environment. Anyway, Biden, who has made the economy a centerpiece of his domestic agenda, in case you didn't know, and is seeking re-election, has said he would consider spending cuts alongside tax adjustments, but the Republicans' latest offer was, quote, unacceptable. And we have actual sound for that. Unacceptable! Yeah, he was getting very shrill about it. It's not usually where he goes with all this. Anyway, let's see. Oh, by the way, some far-right House Freedom Caucus members have urged a halt to talks, demanding that the Senate adopt their House-passed legislation, which has been rejected by Democrats. McCarthy, who made extensive concessions to right-wing hardliners to secure the speaker's spot, may risk being removed by members of his own party if they do not like the deal he cuts. That's always true. Remember the whole vacating the chair bit? That'll be real fun and interesting to watch. And I don't know. It's exciting, end times sort of way, and maybe we'll all get to watch that. Also out there, liberal Democrats, really everybody, have pushed back against any cuts that would harm families and lower-income Americans. Hakeem Jeffries, the top House Democrat, accused Republicans of running a hostage negotiation with the talks and said he is seeking Republican votes for his discharge petition that would raise the debt ceiling all on its own, a clean debt ceiling increase. Biden has offered to freeze spending at this year's levels, Jeffries said, an offer that was rejected by Republicans, and quite honestly, wasn't that popular among Democrats either, I am sure. Okay, so that's where we stand. Of course, Joan will join us to discuss it further, although maybe, we may do her a favor if we can get some of this background stuff out of the way, and then she's she's always free to do whatever she wants, quite honestly. It's always fun and entertaining, and she's got an eye on 10 different things, and no shortage of stories in her head either. But let me at least have her page open so that we get some idea of what she might want to bring to the table, rather than what we convince her we would demand from her. I think we all know where we stand on the debt ceiling, but, in case there's anything new and fun and exciting, esoterica and little bits and pieces that really fill out the picture, we can leave the door open for all of that by laying down the background. Okay. But I don't think much has changed. We've been watching this for weeks. We always knew we would be here, largely because she kept telling us we would be here. And how many days are left? If you know that there are 10 days left before default, how many days will it take to get to a deal? 10. That's generally the answer when it comes to dealing with Congress. Okay. By the way, as I was looking through email and others of our various inputs for the show, I noticed today that one of the email services that constantly is bombarding me with mostly garbage, but I can't bring myself to get rid of it. The word of the day, people. I don't know how I got on this word genius, and I really should just stop the thing. But, I have this vague curiosity about, maybe they'll bring me something interesting. And maybe once every, 7 to 9 years or so, they bring me something that I say, I would open that up and tell people what the word of the day is. We could make it a regular feature, but the words aren't great. But today's word of the day I thought was fun and interesting. It is argle bargle. That's not the description of what the word of the day, that's the actual word of the day. And I thought, I didn't even really quite realize that was an official word, but I guess it is, and they have something to say about argle bargle. If you click the button and give them the clicks that they're looking for in life. It's a noun. The origin is 19th century or so, originally from Scottish, in other words. Copious but meaningless talk or writing, nonsense. I often add a Y to that to make it yargle bargle. The background here, argle bargle, based on the Scots word argle, possibly a mispronunciation of the word argue, and meaning the same. The Scots expression argy bargy is a variation. So that's of some interest, and then they add more crap because they got to fill up a page in order to make you feel like you're not just a total sucker for clicking on the thing. Like whoopsie daisy or hurly burly, argle bargle is an example of rhyming reduplication, except that whoopsie daisy, I guess the E at the end, barely rhyming reduplication, but that's when a new word is created by repeating a word or adding a second similar sounding word. Argle bargle was based on the Scots word argle, meaning argue, but it took on the meaning of a verbal argument. Over time, argle bargle went from describing a multi-party argument to an expression of disdain for a copious volume of words that don't say much of anything at all. Welcome to the Argle Bargle in the Morning Show, I guess. I've always favored the term myself, so it was fun to see it getting, I would say, the recognition it deserves, but it really, it's above and beyond what it deserves. Doesn't deserve all that much. It's fun and interesting, but that's about it. Okay, well, let's see. Anything else I need to catch up on for today? from the various, well, I've got some backlog from the inputs of others, including, by the way, Patrick Snyder, who sent something to us, I guess, over the weekend. Just something of interest on COVID, which is still there, by the way. We pretend that it isn't, but let's see. He's retweeting something from, and he is tweeting using the Bird site, from Christina. Who's Christina? Well, I don't know. But she's Canadian, so we know that much. There's a little Canadian flag thing there. And she was just pointing out, I guess, something that she picked up from a medical journal here. It's just noting that mask mandates were associated with greater reductions in aerosol concentrations than air cleaners and with lower transmission. So in other words, we need to clean the air and do better with ventilation indoors, etc. We also need to get vaccinated. But on top of all that, keep wearing those masks, actually, in order to actually learn to live with COVID with the hashtag bring back masks. I'm in about half and half with the masking these days. I still take it out and put it on. I got it on a little string around my neck in case I end up in a place where it really seems wise to be masked. But most places, I don't know, they have put on the show of adding, air cleaners or doing better ventilation work or whatever. And, for the most part, I don't know, it's probably like 95% unmasked these days. Still a couple of folks doing it. I still do it in a grocery store for some reason, even though they probably have done more for their air circulation. Those big box stores, I would think can probably, they seem to be able to crank up the air exchange a lot better than, mom and pop strip mall stores. Anyway, just pointing that out, that now the scientific evidence says, yeah, I mean, it's great that we should be doing that, air cleaners and air circulation, but masks, they work. I never really did understand exactly why people thought that they would not, but there you go. People just don't think so, because they don't like them. And that was it. I mean, it seems pretty obvious to me. Like, okay, there's a filter on your face. That's actually pretty good. So, all right. Well, let's see. Other things to catch up on here. Let me keep the KITM hashtag open on the Bird site. Thanks again, as usual, to John Shiflett for alerting people to the fact that we are awake this morning and covering the stories. And now we dive into Pocket and set up the day. Here's a great one. We flagged this for you the other day as a possibility, and now, as it turns out, the procedural posture of E. Jean Carroll's case turns out to be such that, yes, they can, in fact, they can request and have, in fact, now requested adding asking the court to factor in the Trump comments on the CNN town hall into, the whole legal picture. Here's how. I guess with a couple of minutes here, there's the long version and there's the short version. Why not do the long version? New York Times has this, and I think we'll go ahead with it. E. Jean Carroll seeks new damages from Trump for comments on CNN. The former president's repeated denials that he sexually abused Ms. Carroll, quote, show the depth of his malice, unquote, and merit heavy damages, her lawyer wrote. I had wondered about whether or not, I wasn't sure whether they had reached the damages phase yet when I was first commenting about it in the lawsuit. But I guess it was all at once. There was a jury verdict and then verdict right away on the damages. So I thought that, sometimes in some trials, they separate those procedures and they take a little while longer to consider damages separately. And if he mouths off in the middle of the damages procedure, you hurt yourself. You end up getting heavier verdict when it comes to damages. But apparently that was all taken care of, and I wondered whether there was any procedure for reopening consideration of that or whether it was filing a new suit. But as it turns out, there are 2 lawsuits out there, and only one of which was just brought to trial and resulted in the verdict finding liability for the former president. Benjamin Weiser reporting this for the New York Times. We'll see if this clears anything up. E. Jean Carroll, who this month won $5 million in damages from former President Donald Trump, is now seeking a, quote, very substantial additional amount in response to his insults on a CNN program just a day after she won her sexual abuse and defamation case. And at first, the shorter version from The Hill was explaining, the defamation case was separate. She alleged defamation in two separate cases, as it turns out. It's very, all right, maybe this will clear it up. Ms. Carroll's filing on Monday in Manhattan federal court seeks to intensify the financial pain for Mr. Trump. That's always a good idea. The jury in her civil case found him liable on May 9th for sexual abuse and defamation. It ordered him to pay Ms. Carroll, a former advice columnist and fixture in Manhattan's media circles, $2 million for the sexual abuse and $3 million for the defamation. Monday's filing came in a separate defamation lawsuit that Ms. Carroll filed in 2019 against Mr. Trump, which is still before the same judge who presided in the civil trial. That case stemmed from comments made earlier that year, shortly after Ms. Carroll said that he had raped her in a Manhattan department store dressing room in the mid-1990s. The suit has been sidetracked by appeals and is still pending. In a separate letter to the judge, Ms. Carroll's attorney, Roberta A. Kaplan, revealed with little elaboration that Mr. Trump has threatened to sue Ms. Carroll, quote, in retaliation and possibly to seek sanctions. On May 10th, Mr. Trump, who is seeking to regain the presidency, went on CNN and echoed his earlier denials, calling Ms. Carroll's account fake and a made-up story. Despite a photograph showing them together, he claimed again that he had never met Ms. Carroll, called her a whack job, and said the civil trial was, quote, a rigged deal, which, it was never in doubt, the outcome, but that didn't make it rigged. It was never in doubt because you're a rapist and a liar. Anyway, Monday's court filing argues Mr. Trump's statements show the depth of his malice toward Carroll, since it is hard to imagine defamatory conduct that could possibly be more motivated by hatred, ill will, or spite. Let's see if, after the break, we can clear up exactly what's happening with the two different suits and why they were both filed and what it means. Hi everybody, it's me, David Waldman. Yes, the same guy who interrupts you all the time. Interrupting you one more time, just to tell you again, another reminder that your contributions are what keep this show on the air, and patreon.com, patreon.com, is still among the easiest ways to make the sustaining subscription donations that keep us afloat. Are you ready for the pep talk about how our Patreon campaign is still going strong and growing? Well, too bad. Yeah, the plain fact is we actually are headed in the wrong direction, and whereas we once had about 175 monthly patrons, we're now actually down below 150. Time to recruit some more. Not exactly the kind of news I wanted to share, but there it is. For those of you in a position to support the show, patreon.com does make it easy to make those secure, recurring monthly contributions to do so. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. We've been through a lot together. The worst of the pandemic, we hope. The worst of the insurrection, we hope. So go ahead and treat yourself. You don't need an excuse. Give yourself the gift of a little something you enjoy in life. Support the show. And of course, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running on those options too. So thanks again, everyone, for all your support. We couldn't, or at least shouldn't, do it without you. Hope you'll be on board soon too. Thanks for all your support. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Okay, we continue with the New York Times long-form version of the coverage of the new developments in E. Jean Carroll's legal pursuits against Donald Trump. Here's a little additional, I don't know what you would call it. It doesn't exist in paper, but only in the on the online version. A little box that you can click through with more facts about the background of the two suits. What to know about E. Jean Carroll's accusations. You're not allowed to know more than that. You're not required, certainly, but you might not even be allowed. You peons, here's what you need to know. I hate that. But anyway, they're just trying to be helpful. One, I guess, card number one here is that there are two lawsuits. All right, we know that much. We just don't know why. E. Jean Carroll, a writer who says Donald Trump raped her in the mid-1990s. It's, okay. There you have it. Has filed two separate lawsuits against the former president. Here's what to know. I just found that kind of astonishing that they, feel like, we're in the middle of the story about this. We know who she is. And what a way of describing her. But here's what to know. Let's find out. Well, this one we know. Who is E. Jean Carroll and what does she claim? Okay. What else have we got here? How did Trump respond to her claims? Of course, he said she was a whack job and a liar. On what grounds is Carroll suing Trump? In 2022, on what grounds is she suing Trump for rape? In 2022, New York passed a law, I forgot that they had actually done this, giving adult sexual assault victims a one-time opportunity to file civil cases, even if the statute of limitations has long expired. Carroll subsequently filed that lawsuit, accusing Trump of rape and seeking damages. On May 9th, a jury found Trump liable for the sexual abuse and defamation of Carroll and awarded her $5 million in damages. Okay, so I see what happened here. If the next card doesn't explain it, then I guess now I'm able to do this. So why did she also sue him for defamation? In 2019, Carroll filed a defamation lawsuit against Trump in New York for making disparaging comments and branding her a liar after the publication of her memoir. On October 19th, the former president was questioned under oath in the case, and that suit is currently tied up in an appeal. So, at first, the statute of limitations had expired on the rape charges, both criminal, I guess, and civil, in terms of suing him for the tort. So she filed the defamation lawsuit. His big mouth landed him in court. That was the only grounds on which she could file a viable suit at that point. So she filed for defamation. And then, as they explained in the last card, the New York State Legislature adopted a new law giving people, I guess, a one-time chance to file. It seems like a pretty good bet that they actually had an eye on that case, which is kind of amazing. And I don't know whether there's any weirdness involved. I mean, I'm sure it applied to a lot of people, and they probably wrote the law just so that, while that would be offering the opportunity to lots of people, they may have been chiefly motivated by that. I don't know if that's like sound grounds for legislating, but you can't look too far into it without, a court can't look too far into it without violating our traditional, anyway, norms of the separation of powers. And so I guess in New York, that's likely to stand. So, all right, yeah. So in offering her the opportunity to actually sue for the tort of rape, she took that opportunity, filed, and then said, by the way, I also have this defamation claim. Why don't I make the same claims in tandem alongside the rape tort claims and bring it all as one case? But then there's this other case which was still pending before, I guess, the New York legislature changed the law such that she could file this second lawsuit. There was pre-trial litigation that has ended up in appeals and is still locked up in appeals. Remember when President Trump's defense team, you remember the outrageous idea that they said, well, he can't be sued for his comments because he's the sitting president of the United States. And everybody said, but I thought we cleared that all up with Clinton, that, yeah, it was absolutely possible to involve the president in a civil lawsuit while he's the sitting president. You just can't bring criminal charges. And they said, well, they made the argument that, well, you were talking about Clinton and about something else, and we're different. And we think it would be, it was within the scope of his duties to respond to these charges, even though he made it nasty, disparaging, and personal. And it's highly dubious whether or not anybody ordinarily would have considered that within the realm of the duties of the president to yell and scream and say that a certain woman is, quote unquote, not his type. It isn't, but they're still working on that one. So while they were appealing that and delaying things, and I guess Trump thought it was a big win because he was going to push this thing, beyond the term of his presidency and maybe even beyond the term of 2 presidencies. Should he have been returned to office, quote unquote, returned to office. But didn't matter. The New York State Legislature created a second opportunity, and so now we have the splashy headlines. But as a result, that original 2019 defamation only suit is still pending. There hasn't been another rape, so there's no point in going back with that tort. But there now has been another instance of defamation. So she's adding the complaint of the defamation that took place on the during the CNN town hall to the complaint of defamation stemming from the 2019 comments that he originally made that originally got him back in court. It's actually kind of fascinating and a little bit of hair splitting, but it's like having a shell piece of legislation standing out there that you can then strike out everything after the enacting clause and insert some new text and call it an amendment and not have to bring it to through the entire committee process in one house or another, the little trick that they like to do. And then I guess that's what they're doing even with the discharge petition. Every once in a while when Greg mentions it, he mentions that there was a shell piece of legislation that they might have used to swap out what was in there for something on the debt ceiling. Anyway, very fascinating. And I was wondering about that. I didn't know that situation, but I was talking about it over last weekend and saying I really think that they're going to be looking for the opportunity to bring some sort of case about what happened on CNN. And I don't know, if I had known more about the procedural posture of the case and this other still pending one, that might have changed the discussion some. But, some doubt expressed in that conversation about whether or not there was such a vehicle and, further, some argument about, well, what are the damages here? I mean, everybody knows him and everybody knows her. Who thinks better or worse of either one of them based on what happened in CNN? And, it's an argument. Of course, I think worse of Donald Trump based on what happened on CNN. I mean, there's no limit to how badly I can, how poorly I can feel about Trump or how low his image can go. He can always go lower with me. Did he go from negative to negative and so therefore it's not much of a change? I think it's a matter of degree. To me, it means something that somebody who would be handed a judgment for defamation and then be asked to pay $5 million to cover it would go right back out and do more defamation on national television and on what should have been her day of triumph, where the country finds out that legally speaking, she's right, he's wrong. He comes out and says the opposite. I think that's worth a lot of money, and they ought to take it out of his hands and give it to her. And, of course, that motivates his attorneys to claim that, well, the whole thing was always about money. Which, so what? Quite honestly, yeah, maybe it was. Now give it to me. That's it. I mean, it was all about money, and you're entitled to that money because that guy, well, the jury said so. He committed the tort of sexual assault, I guess we could say, and did in fact defame her. So give up the money. Alina Habba, that's the name of, I guess, the lead not the lead attorney. Joseph Tacopina was the lead attorney for him on this one. But Alina Habba, whose name we've heard a lot in this case. I can't remember exactly where she came from, but we've heard her name before. And she spoke up and said on Monday that no damages were warranted in Carroll's 2019 defamation suit, let alone punitive damages. So the idea of adding more based on CNN to Trump's defense lawyers, to no one's surprise, they also feel in their public statements that this new claim is worthless, and says, basically, that accuses her of, that is to say, Alina Habba accuses Jean Carroll of just seeking a payday on this. But so what? What if that were true? If she can prove the elements of the tort, then she is entitled to that money. And, who never walks away from money that they're entitled to? Who never walks away from money that they're not entitled to, but can somehow muscle out of other people? Donald Trump. So what could be better and more fitting than for Jean Carroll to leverage more out of him now that he's done more dumb stuff? Okay. So I think we're up to date on that one. Let's see, other things to talk about. Oh yeah, well, one debt ceiling related item that maybe we want to get out of the way or put on the table to see if there's any room for discussion of it with Joan. Ezra Klein, I think, no surprise, making something of a overbroad mistake. But in an analysis of the politics of the situation of the debt ceiling, not terribly surprising that we find ourselves somewhat in disagreement. Here is his opinion piece from the Times on May 21st, Sunday. Liberals are persuading themselves of a debt ceiling plan that won't work. Yes, no, / maybe on that one. What's going on? What are we talking about? The debt ceiling might be the single dumbest feature of American law. He grants that much. Congress decides to spend money and later schedules a separate vote on whether the government will pay its bills. Kind of. I mean, I don't really do it that way, but that's the upshot of it. If the government doesn't pay its bills, calamity ensues. So, all at least partially true. Moody's Analytics estimates that even a short debt ceiling breach could cause a recession. That feels like a dramatic music moment. I mean, I didn't make it sound that way, but it is true. An analysis by the White House's Council of Economic Advisors modeled a more protracted default and foresaw a crash on the order of the 2008 financial crisis, which totally sucked. I don't know if you remember that one. The stock market falls 45%, unemployment rises by 5 points, and America's long-term borrowing costs are much, much higher. All of this to pay money we already owe and can easily borrow. Madness. Defenders of the debt ceiling will tell you that the limit has been around a long time, and not very long. The Supreme Court wouldn't think it was long enough to give a crap about it, probably, and has largely operated to the good. It really hasn't. America has never defaulted on its debts, but the debt ceiling has often motivated compromise between the two parties. That may be true, but it's a bit like saying that since America has won every game of Russian roulette it's played so far, it should keep playing. Okay, still all right with this so far. And so I understand and share the interest in ways to render the debt ceiling null and void. Democrats should have eliminated the debt ceiling when they held Congress and the White House in 2021 and 2022, but they didn't. And we know that Joan is in agreement with that. And well worth saying over and over again. So she's invited to do the same. Again, what am I looking at here? There's an ad in the middle of the page here now. About, for books. And there's a book entitled Vladimir Putin, Life Coach. I have no idea what that's about, and I hope it's a joke. Anyway, now 2 more unconventional tactics are proving particularly popular in the liberal imagination, and here's where we'll part ways a little bit. In one, President Biden simply declares the debt ceiling unconstitutional, pointing to the 14th Amendment, which holds that the validity of the public debt of the United States shall not be questioned. Oh, that's all it says. It shall not be questioned. So open to interpretation. 5 Senate Democrats, including Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren, are circulating a letter calling on Biden to do just that. On Friday, 66 progressive congressional Democrats sent the president their own letter making a similar case. The other is the coin. Democrats, it doesn't say Democrats are promoting it, but anyway, Treasury Department would, in this case, use a loophole in a 1997 law to mint a platinum coin of any value it chooses, $1 trillion, say, and uses the new money to keep paying the government's debts. In remarks after a meeting with House Speaker Kevin McCarthy, Biden said he was, quote, considering the argument that the debt ceiling is unconstitutional. The problem, he continued, is that it would have to be litigated. And that's the problem with all these ideas, and why, in the end, it's doubtful that Biden or any Democrat will try them. He may be right that they would fear doing it because there would be litigation involved. But where I would say I differ with Ezra on this one is, so what? Who cares? But, and he may be right in the sense that, yeah, but Democrats will say, I care. I'm worried about that. Well, I would argue you shouldn't be. And I would rather have seen Ezra argue he's right. You shouldn't be. But he takes the opposite tack. The legality of the debt ceiling or $1 trillion platinum coin doesn't depend on how liberals read the Constitution or the Coinage Act. It depends on how 3 conservatives read it. And this starts to be a good point, but I do think there's a good counter. We discussed it yesterday. Who are the 3 conservatives that we're worried about here? John Roberts, Brett Kavanaugh, Neil Gorsuch, who are the closest the Supreme Court now comes to having swing justices. He leaves out the people who he thinks will just automatically oppose Biden, I guess. Barrett, and who else we got listed here? And Thomas, I guess, and Alito. It's easy enough to come up with counter arguments that conservative justices are likely to find persuasive. Michael McConnell, former judge on the U.S. Court of Appeals for the 10th Circuit, to which he was appointed by President George W. Bush, just offered one in these pages. For the United States to fail to pay interest or principal on its debts would be financially catastrophic, but it would not affect the validity of the debt, he wrote. When borrowers fail to make payments on lawfully incurred debt, this does not question the validity of those debts. Their debts are just as valid as before. The borrowers are just in default. And that's an interesting argument. I don't know exactly how I think I feel about that one, but that's a good semantic argument, right? If Biden were to say, well, I'm going to invoke the 14th Amendment because the validity of the debt shall not be questioned, so therefore I order us to borrow more money so that the validity of the debt isn't questioned. Some conservative judges could read it and say, no, it's not actually necessary that we pay the debts in order to render them valid. And a good parallel here. Well, when an ordinary individual owes money but fails to pay it, that doesn't mean the debt is invalid. That would be a great way to get out of the debt. It's just that it's a valid debt and you can't pay it and you're in default. Still, when you're talking about an economy, and macroeconomic issues. I guess here analyzing it in microeconomic terms. Analyzed in macroeconomic terms, where the very value of United States currency, and indeed many other currencies around the world that pin their value to the dollar, are pinned to the idea that there won't ever be not only a declaration that federal debt is invalid, but that there'll never be a default. I mean, maybe we just need to change our expectations, but can we change the world's economic expectations in 10 days? Maybe. I don't know. So the semantics may not do you any good. The coin gambit is similarly easy to poke holes in if one wants to. Well, we might as well do it because there's a paragraph. It's pretty quick. Preston Byrne, a partner at the law firm Brown Rudnick, notes that the Supreme Court has often looked at statutes for which a simple reading of a limited law would seem to grant the executive almost unlimited powers. In many such cases, the court struck down those readings. Congress, the court has said, does not, quote, hide elephants in mouse holes. And that too is a, partially persuasive argument. It was probably never the intent, would be the layman's argument, probably never Congress's intent in the Coinage Act to contemplate the coining of $1 trillion coins for the purposes of getting around the statutory debt limit. And so therefore, although it would seem to allow it, did it really contemplate it? Probably not. But that's funny because it gets into legislative history and, reading the thoughts of lawmakers who framed this thing. And, ordinarily the conservative Supreme Court justices are against that, unless, of course, the minds you're reading are from even more distant past. That is to say, the minds of the founders, which they're pretty sure they can read very clearly and have exclusive rights to read as well. But anyway, Ezra goes on to say, my point is not that more conservative readings of these laws are right in some absolute sense. It's that no such absolute sense matters. We just watched this Supreme Court wipe out decades of precedent to overrule Roe. He's right there. It has repeatedly entertained cases that even conservative legal scholars thought farcical just a few years earlier. True also. I still remember Orrin Kerr, the law professor who clerked for Justice Anthony Kennedy, telling me at the beginning of the Obamacare case, that there was a, quote, less than 1% chance that the courts would invalidate the individual mandate, only to update that to a 50-50 chance as the court prepared to rule. The Supreme Court does what it wants to do. Does it want to let the Biden administration dissolve the debt ceiling using a novel legal theory? Again, good point. Always worth considering. We consider it every time. The court will do what it wants. It doesn't feel bound by precedent or logic or anything. It's a political body and it will act politically. And right now, the Republican political position in Congress, anyway, is, yeah, we're going to force a default. And it's not even necessarily all that bad of a thing, but we definitely are prepared to force it and in some cases want to force it. And so therefore, it's a decent assumption to say that the Republicans on the Supreme Court will be largely in agreement with that. But I don't know that I believe that. And also, I'm not certain that it isn't reasonably good politics to say, well, if you're dealing with another party that actually wants to force a default, you're probably going to get that default. So there might be no way to avoid that default. The game now becomes, how do we lay the fault for the default where it belongs with the people who force it? And the answer is, lay it at the feet of the Supreme Court. I know that they might go ahead and do it, but then what are you if that's where they're headed, then that's where they're headed. All you need to do is tell the right story about it at some point, and now's that time. But let's go on with what Ezra has to say, and then we'll rebut it a little bit further. If testing the question wouldn't cost anything, there would be no harm in trying, but I don't think it would have no cost. The strength of the Biden administration's political position is that it stands for normalcy. The debt ceiling has always been raised before, and it must be raised now. That's a nice thought, but they're not going to do it. But if the administration declares the debt ceiling unconstitutional, only to have the Supreme Court declare the maneuver unconstitutional, then Biden owns the market chaos that would follow. No, I don't think so. I think the opposite. Who will voters blame in that scenario? Republicans, who say they just wanted to negotiate over the budget, as is tradition, or Biden, who did something no other president has done and failed? I mean, it's an argument. But right now, at least, the positions are clear. The White House is open to budget negotiations, but opposed to debt ceiling brinkmanship. Republicans are the ones threatening default if their demands are not met. They are pulling the pin on this grenade in full view of the American people. Biden should think carefully before taking the risk of snatching it out of their hands and holding it himself. I just disagree that that's what's happening here. What I think is happening here is Biden is saying, listen, I declare that you should not pull that pin. And I won't let you pull that pin. And Republicans decide to pull it anyway. I don't know how much attention people are really paying to this thing, but describing these negotiations and saying, yeah, but they want to negotiate about something different. And then they're threatening default, which is so scary and awful, that's not even a fair negotiating position. It's a hostage situation. I know we've said this until we're blue in the face. It's happened over and over again. Nobody seems to get it. Whereas I think, if the situation were explained, like I say, you take a page from Trump, right? Where you say, look, I don't know whether I'm right or whether I'm wrong. I say I'm going to do it and I'm going to let the courts figure it out. Apparently, nobody knows whether this is the right thing to do, the wrong thing to do, whether we do have this power, don't have this power, it is constitutional or it's unconstitutional. I don't even know. I'm not even going to claim, as Trump would, oh, it's totally constitutional, of course, and all the courts would be wrong if they said the opposite. Just do the thing. You can be humble about it. I really don't know. I mean, I have advisors that tell me with fair certainty, and I think I believe them, that I guess this really does mean that the debt ceiling is unconstitutional, and we've just been operating in error this whole time. But because it's been functional and we've always worked something out, no harm done, constitution-wise, but truthfully, this has been unconstitutional for a long time. And I know that might confuse you or make you think, well, why did anybody tell me it was constitutional? Why didn't anybody tell me it was unconstitutional at a minimum? Well, Republicans on the court are doing that all the time. You thought you understood the law as it stood, but they reverse it. Maybe 50 years, maybe 100 years of precedent stood on its head because they say so. So fine. That's the job. That's what they do from time to time. Let's have them make this decision now. I will do this thing. If I'm right, fantastic. The economy continues on as it has forever. There's the normalcy you are asking for. There's no problem. The United States does not default on its debt. We continue as before. If I'm wrong and the courts say we can't do it, I'm a law-abiding citizen, just like the rest of you. We will take the court at its word. Problems will ensue. I just want to point that out. The economy, it's said, will collapse. It may take the entire world economy with it. It may mean dollars are worthless. It may mean your life savings disappears. It may mean that billionaires who take Supreme Court justices on $500,000 excursions around the world on super yachts no longer own super yachts or no longer own the money to pay for the operation of a super yacht. And so therefore it sits in the dock and it doesn't take you to Indonesia for vacation and doesn't do anything. Nothing works. All the bribes, all the money, all the things that were flowing, all the benefits inuring to you from your position of power, which was largely based on money, right? What is Leonard Leo using to reshape the Supreme Court? Money. And if money doesn't exist, or you can only get people to do things for you if you provide them with things of value, trinkets, beads, gold, performance of labor. Wouldn't that might actually not be a bad idea to go back to that as the basis for an economy. But anyway, the point is it would be laid at the feet of the Supreme Court and say, I'll tell you what, I did my best. Maybe I'm wrong, but you have the last word on this. So, conservative justices, do we have an economy or do we not have an economy? Is money worth something or is money not worth something? I say money's worth something and we should continue as we have been. You say maybe, no, I'm going to pull the plug. John Roberts, Amy Coney Barrett, Sam Alito, Brett Kavanaugh, Neil Gorsuch, Clarence Thomas. You guys are going to personally pull the plug on the economy. I mean, nothing I can do to stop you. That's the Constitution, which is apparently a suicide pact after all. So here you go. Here's a noose. Here's a gun. Here's a ladder. Apparently you can kill yourself with a ladder as well. Maybe a swimming pool. Are you going to kill America and the world economy or are you not? I don't know. It's up to you. Do what you want. I don't mean to pressure you. Just sign here. Put your name on it. You 9 people are responsible for the future of the world. Go for it. See what happens. I don't know what they'll do. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Did we jump in a little early there? No, I think we're going to be okay. Anyway, so yes, and here's the difference of opinion finally, laid bare between, say, me and, say, Ezra Klein. Ezra, quite reasonably, but I think ultimately maybe in the wrong, but it's a dice roll and it's the entire world economy, so, maybe he's the more cautious of the two of us. But he's basically saying, look, you don't know what the Supreme Court is going to do. So it's irresponsible to allow them to do it. And yeah, I guess so, right? I mean, I guess if we guess wrong and the world economy collapses, we'll be pretty sorry about that we left it to the Supreme Court. On the other hand, I guess while I don't trust the Supreme Court as far as I could throw them, I trust the Republicans in Congress a lot less, or would be less able to throw them. There are only 9 Supreme Court justices and 200 and something House Republicans. I imagine, collectively speaking, that I could throw them a lot less far than just the 9. And I don't know whether this means trying to throw each one of them individually. Even so, the chances that I would become fatigued and even working in volume, I think I would probably be able to throw the Supreme Court largely. I feel like I could throw them farther, is what I mean. And as terrible as Alito, Thomas, Amy Coney Barrett, Kavanaugh, the rest of them are, Marjorie Taylor Greene, Lauren Yo-Yo, the rest of them are far worse and would do far worse for the country. But basically it comes down to this. No one knows what the Supreme Court will do. Ezra Klein says that will lead them to act in a partisan fashion. Good bet. True. All other things being equal, but all other things are not equal here. We're talking about asking whether the Supreme Court will shoot itself in the foot. My guess is, now ordinarily they're very pro-gun rights. If the case is, yes, but you have to shoot yourself, my guess is they find a restriction, a loophole for curtailing Second Amendment rights all of a sudden. In other words, if you're going to shoot yourself in the foot, you're going to come up with a different decision after all. And I think that laying it at their feet is, well, it's a gamble, but I think it comes out the other way. I just, but I do see, well, his best argument, I think, in favor of it is you can't afford to risk it with these idiots. They're idiots, right? But I don't know what you mean by, when you say I can't afford to risk it with these idiots, like what do you suggest I do otherwise? Because the only other alternative is to let Marjorie Taylor Greene and Lauren Yo-Yo drive this thing instead, right? I'm either dealing with the Supreme Court, with which, I'm not negotiating. I'm simply saying, okay, this is what I know about you people and how you operate. Do I want to take your decision, or do I want to just say, well, I'm just going to go with the cave to the Lauren Yo-Yos of the world? And I think that's the worst of the two options. So, we're damned if we do, we're damned if we don't. I think, let's say, I've seen the conservatives on the Supreme Court, not this court and not these conservatives necessarily, but we know about John Roberts and what he does and how he operates sometimes behind the scenes. He may already have lost control of this court. That's entirely possible. But we know that, I guess if you're pointing at history and saying this is how they work, which is a little bit of what Ezra is doing here too, what about the example of various cases in which John Roberts has in the end said, yes, but the chaos that will ensue if we do the Republican thing here is obvious and we can't do it. Now, that was a different composition of a court and he had different players to deal with. So I guess that's also a good argument, but that doesn't get mentioned here necessarily, and not overtly anyway. But anyway, I do think that if there's a comparison to be made, say, between the conservatism of the Supreme Court and the conservatism of Congress, I still think that there's more of what the traditional media would helpfully to Republicans label moderates in terms of their republicanism on the Supreme Court than there are in the House at this point. So me, it is, it's kind of cavalier to say, yeah, sure, I actually opt to roll the dice. But when you consider that the only way of dealing with and placating House Republicans is you don't even get to roll. You just opt to accept that you're going to lose. I don't know if that's a great alternative. I think maybe it's not. I think maybe that's it's going to get worse. And though it's never a responsible option to ask these Republicans on this Supreme Court, tell me what we're going to do. Talk to me about how you see the world shaping up when you get to mold it. Not a great option, but only the second worst behind, okay, someone's going to have to mold the future. Shouldn't it be Marjorie Taylor Greene and Lauren Yo-Yo and Paul Goho? Whatever. Gosar, Boebert, whatever their names are. Bad bet. So, okay, I have my disagreements. We'll see whether Joan feels similarly, perhaps. She may want to talk about that. She may want to talk about something completely different. So let's lay the groundwork for something completely different. Let's see. There's an awful lot of directions to go with this one. Why not a couple of these interesting things here? First of all, how about this fun development? Is this what we heard his name for the other day? Texts tie DeSantis, not his name, closely to Trump insider Lev Parnas in 2018 race, says report. Lev Parnas' name came up very recently. Was it in connection with DeSantis? That I can't remember. Too much DeSantis news any given day of the week. But let's check this out so we can clear this up and figure out what's going on here. This is from CNBC, although I guess it's a Reuters report. Second call for Reuters today. Any byline given on this one? Doesn't look like it, unless I'm just missing it. But I'm out of time, in my view, for looking for it. Too bad. Ukrainian-American businessman Lev Parnas and his business partner were arrested in 2019, same year that E. Jean Carroll filed her defamation suit, by the way, accused by the U.S. government of funneling a Russian oligarch's money into American political campaigns. By the way, he switched sides not only in the Trump wars, but on the Ukraine-Russia thing as well. One recipient of Parnas' donations, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, has said he was barely an acquaintance. The governor does not have a relationship with these individuals, DeSantis' spokesperson at the time, Helen Aguirre-Ferrer, said in a statement on October 10th, 2019. 6 days later, DeSantis told reporters that Parnas, quote, was just like any other donor, nothing more than that. But DeSantis and Parnas worked more closely together than the Republican governor has disclosed, according to a detailed account of their relationship that Parnas provided to Reuters, and 63 previously unreported text messages from DeSantis to Parnas. That's a lot of messages for somebody who's no different from any other donor. Between May and October of 2018, as DeSantis campaigned for governor. A jury later found Parnas guilty of campaign finance crimes and other charges. As DeSantis prepares to take a widely anticipated leap into the presidential campaign this week, the disclosures from Parnas cast a new light on the Florida governor's relationship with the businessman and the role Parnas played in helping DeSantis gain entree to the circle of former President Donald Trump. DeSantis spokesman Dave Abrams did not respond to specific questions on the existence of the texts and Parnas' account of their relationship. This is another recycled narrative that has been proven wrong many times over. I don't remember it, said this spokesperson. DeSantis gave back the contribution after Parnas ran into legal trouble. Maybe. The text messages reviewed by Reuters show that DeSantis frequently, in more than 20 texts, appealed to fellow Floridian Parnas for introductions, advice, and other fundraising help during his hotly contested campaign for governor. Two sources close to DeSantis during his 2018 campaign confirmed the texter's number belonged to DeSantis at that time. The texts also reveal that Parnas served as an intermediary between DeSantis and former New York City Mayor Rudy Giuliani, who at that time was the personal attorney of then President Trump. In one case, 10 days before the 2018 election, DeSantis sent Parnas a text with suggested wording for a Giuliani tweet in support of his candidacy, the messages show. Giuliani did not respond to questions sent through his attorney and his spokesman. Ferrer, DeSantis' former spokesperson, also did not respond to requests for comment. Parnas, now 51, shot to prominence in 2019. He was a key figure in the events leading to Trump's first impeachment, working with Giuliani to gather damaging information on Democrat Joe Biden's son Hunter in Ukraine. There wasn't any. Accused of withholding aid to Ukraine unless Kyiv investigated Biden, Trump was impeached by the Democratic-led House of Representatives and charged with abuse of power, acquitted, of course, by the then Republican majority Senate. A federal judge sentenced Parnas last year to 20 months in prison on a separate matter, defrauding investors in a sham company and illegally making donations to U.S. political candidates on behalf of Russian oligarch Andrei Muraviev. Muravyev has been charged in the case, but is a fugitive. He declined to comment as well, just in case you were wondering. Even before his criminal case, Parnas had an unusual resume for a political rainmaker. After moving to Florida from New York in 1995, he worked for penny stock companies that ran into regulatory problems, according to public records. In 2016, a federal court in New York issued a $508,734 judgment against him for defrauding an individual whose family trust lent Parnas money for a movie called Anatomy of an Assassin. According to the judge's ruling, Parnas said he did nothing wrong in that case. Parnas is serving out his sentence under house arrest. Wearing shorts and an ankle bracelet, he spoke with Reuters for several hours at his home in Boca Raton. Parnas now says he regrets his alliance with Giuliani and Trump, as all people eventually do, believing he was used, which he was if he was in an alliance with Giuliani and Trump. He said he shared the text with Reuters because he feels betrayed by DeSantis, who he says stopped returning texts or calls once he won the governor's race. Parnas once considered DeSantis a close confidant, he said. We became very friendly. In 2018, Parnas was a well-known figure in Trump's orbit, often seen with Giuliani. Parnas and his business partner, another Ukrainian-American named Igor Fruman, would later pay Giuliani $500,000 for consultant work, Reuters has reported. Don't forget about that. I think I had. Parnas said he first met DeSantis on May 9th, 2018. So the anniversary just passed. About 3 months before Republican primary elections in Florida, DeSantis, then a 3-term U.S. representative, was locked in a tight primary race for governor with Adam Putnam, Florida's then Commissioner of Agriculture. Ron DeSantis approached me at the Trump International Hotel and introduced himself. Amazing. Telling me that he was told to come meet me because I was very close with Donald Trump, Parnas said. Reuters could not establish who told DeSantis to meet with Parnas at the Washington, D.C. hotel. While Trump had already tweeted support for DeSantis the prior December, DeSantis wanted a formal endorsement by Trump ahead of the August primary. He told me he heard I was the guy to speak to because of my relationship with Trump. That's how he worded it, Parnas said. Now, there's no evidence that Parnas had any direct influence with Trump. A spokesperson for Trump did not respond to a request for comment, but Parnas conferred frequently with Giuliani. At 9:49 p.m. that day, in May of 2018, DeSantis texted his cell phone and email address to Parnas, according to the message reviewed by Reuters. Parnas replied by sending his own email address to DeSantis. At their first meeting at the hotel, Parnas described himself as, quote, a bit standoffish with DeSantis because he hoped to launch a cannabis business and considered DeSantis hostile to legalized marijuana. In another meeting several days later, also at Trump's hotel, DeSantis told him he was not opposed to expanding medical marijuana use in Florida, Parnas said. Reuters could not independently corroborate the hotel meetings. One frequent hotel patron who spoke on condition of anonymity said he remembered seeing DeSantis and Parnas speaking together in the lobby that May or June. The hotel has since been sold. Parnas said Dana Rohrabacher, former Republican congressman from California, was present at the second meeting where Parnas said DeSantis discussed medical marijuana use. Rohrabacher told Reuters he does not recall the meeting or hearing DeSantis talk about marijuana. What do I remember from 5 years ago? Sure, why not? Parnas says after their second meeting, he told DeSantis that he would try to secure a formal Trump endorsement by promoting DeSantis with Giuliani. Parnas spoke with Giuliani the next day, recommending that he talk with DeSantis and back him. In July of 2018, DeSantis publicly expressed support for medical marijuana. Within a week of their second meeting, DeSantis and Parnas began exchanging ideas and gossip about potential donors, the texts show. On May 29, 2018, DeSantis sent Parnas a text introducing his fundraising aide, Heather Barker, and enlisting Parnas' help in lining up donors for events in Boca Raton and on Star Island, an exclusive community in Miami. Let me know a good time this week to chat about logistics and date ideas, Barker texted Parnas. Barker requested that Reuters email her questions for this report, but she didn't respond. The next month, the texts show, DeSantis asked Parnas for advice on how to handle a potential major donor. Would it be reasonable to ask him to donate $50K? DeSantis asked. I think he did 6 figures for Trump. DeSantis had done his homework. The donor, South Florida roofing contractor Michael Trussell, had contributed $100,000 to a joint Trump-Republican fundraising committee in 2016, campaign records show. Parnas replied by text that he would call DeSantis. On the phone, he told DeSantis that Trussell was an acquaintance and would indeed be good for about $50K, Parnas said. 10 days after that exchange, campaign finance records show Trussell's roofing firm donated $10,000 to DeSantis and added another $13,000 before the 2018 election. The firm has contributed another $143,000 since, campaign finance records show. Trussell said he met Parnas once at a Trump fundraiser, but had no relationship with him, adding that DeSantis did not mention Parnas when he called, seeking a campaign donation. On the evening of June 5th, DeSantis reached out to Parnas. I'll swing by Trump Hotel tonight, he said, before I go on Laura Ingraham. Is that okay? Ingraham, of course, host on Fox News. You know who that is. DeSantis was on her show that evening. Perfect, Parnas texted back. Parnas said the two met at the hotel and discussed Giuliani's support of DeSantis. On June 21st, 2018, Parnas' company, Global Energy Producers, donated $50,000 to DeSantis' campaign for governor. The company was unusual. Although incorporated in early 2018 as an energy investor, it never completed a single deal, according to U.S. charges against Parnas. After thanking Parnas for the contribution, DeSantis pushed him again to help land a big donor, Robert Pereira, president of construction firm Middlesex Corporation. Parnas knew the businessman from past fundraisers in Florida. Now let's bring Robert home, DeSantis wrote. 3 weeks later, DeSantis added, make sure he gives a lot. Pereira later co-hosted a fundraiser for DeSantis with Parnas, and his company donated $115,000 to DeSantis' 2018 campaign. He declined to discuss Parnas with Reuters and did not respond to detailed questions. What else have we got here? Political donations from Parnas' company later emerged as part of the criminal case against Parnas and Muravyev, the Russian oligarch who federal authorities indicted for making illegal campaign contributions to boost a planned marijuana business. Justice Department officials said Muravyev tried to influence the 2018 U.S. elections by plotting to send $1 million to candidates and campaigns, hoping to win favor for a cannabis business venture. It is illegal for foreign nationals to donate to American political campaigns. Parnas said DeSantis had agreed to meet Muravyev and knew of the tycoon's ambitions to enter the cannabis business in Florida. The meeting, however, never happened. Prosecutors did not specifically mention the $50,000 donation by Parnas' company to DeSantis in their federal case. Why not? But they said Parnas' donations were part of a scheme that included circumventing campaign finance laws and soliciting money from a foreign national to win influence in Florida. There is no evidence that DeSantis knew of wrongdoing. Parnas defrauded the American public with the foreign donor scheme and lied about the source of funds for political contributions, said a Justice Department statement after Parnas' sentencing last year. On June 22, 2018, Trump tweeted a strong formal endorsement for DeSantis. Ron is strong on borders, tough on crime, except marijuana, and big on cutting taxes. Love our military and our vets. He will be a great governor and has my full endorsement. Promoting Trump's support in his mail and TV ads, DeSantis opened a wide lead. On August 28th, he won that primary, but going into the general election, DeSantis was the underdog, trailing Democratic opponent Tallahassee Mayor Andrew Gillum, the first black nominee for Florida governor. As a federal corruption investigation into Tallahassee's government made headlines, threatening to torpedo Gillum's prospects, Parnas sent DeSantis a text on October 26th, telling him, I'm going to have Rudy do a tweet on Gillum. He needs to hit him on his scandal, DeSantis texted back to Parnas. Can say, as a prosecutor, this would be an indictable case, etc. Parnas texted back a thumbs up emoji and wrote, tomorrow. The next day, Parnas texted DeSantis a picture of Giuliani's tweet. It wasn't exactly what DeSantis suggested, but did use the phrasing, as a former prosecutor and mayor, I asked the people of my adopted state, Florida, to reject the mayor with highest murder and crime rates in state. All right. During the general election, Parnas attended rallies with DeSantis, taking Giuliani's plane from one event to the next. Big day, my brother. We will win, Parnas texted on election day. With Gillum weighed down by corruption investigations, DeSantis eked out a narrow victory. Parnas was photographed hugging DeSantis that night at the victory party. A jury this month acquitted Gillum of lying to the Federal Bureau of Investigation and failed to reach a verdict on charges that he pocketed campaign contributions. The remaining charges were dismissed last week. and yet he's not governor and the other guy is. Had the FBI not leaked their investigation, which ultimately and correctly ended up in an acquittal, there is no question that Andrew Gillum would be the governor of Florida today, Gillum's lawyers said in a statement. An FBI spokesman declined to comment. After the election, DeSantis quit responding to Parnas's texts. By then, Parnas and his business partner Fruman were facing federal scrutiny over their political donations. After Parnas was indicted in October of 2019, DeSantis returned his $50,000 donation to the U.S. government. Fruman pleaded guilty to campaign finance charges in 2021 and was sentenced last year to a year in prison. A jury convicted Parnas of campaign finance crimes. He pleaded guilty to fraud related to his fraud guarantee business, which boasted it could insure people against fraud while defrauding its investors of more than $2 million. Infuriated at being frozen out, Parnas claims that DeSantis reneged on a promise to give him a place on a gubernatorial transition committee. Finally, he said DeSantis agreed to a private meeting in January of 2019 at a jet terminal at West Palm Beach International Airport. He said DeSantis assured him that I'm still his boy, even if he had to avoid associating with him in public. Parnas said he subsequently spoke several times with DeSantis by phone, but they never resumed their close relationship. He says he remains angry at DeSantis. Remember, he was my friend, Parnas said. Well, guess not. I didn't just look at him as the governor, he was my friend. Well, that was awfully dumb. And, all right, it's of interest. I think it might, it's possible it develops into something stronger. Right now, I think there's plenty of room for DeSantis to say, hey, I don't know. I was playing the guy for some money, for some campaign donations. I didn't know where he was getting the money from. I just knew he had it. I wanted it. When it turned out that he was in trouble, I gave the money back. I don't know. I think DeSantis ends up skating on that one, but we'll see whether anything else develops on that front. And let's see, other fun things to share before our last segment. You know what? Here's something that she actually discusses, I think, in one of her more recent posts. So let's jump into the New York Times version of it. Or maybe what I should do, if I can scroll down, I can find her version of it. Or when we can talk a little bit about that. Maybe that's the more reasonable way to do it. If I saw correctly, how far down did I have to go to get this? Now I can't find it. And I'm wondering if maybe, did somebody else write this piece? Or was it in fact Joan? Or did I somehow scroll past it? Let me take another quick look. Oh yeah, here we are. Putin issues laughable new MAGA-approved sanction list. This is kind of weird. And so I don't know whether she refers to the New York Times story on it or someone else's story. But let's take a look at the way Joan treated this one. And we'll save her the time of giving you the background on it. But if she wants to discuss it further, that would be kind of cool. There's a new list of 500 Americans that Vladimir Putin has banned from traveling to or having business in Russia. And it's a who's who of Donald Trump's enemies. Isn't that weird? Political union with Russia to own the liberals, as I used to say, or own the globalists, rather. Putin is using American sanctions over its invasion of Ukraine as an excuse for the travel bans. But his real reason seems clear: to strengthen his alliance with Trump and MAGA Republicans. From Georgia's Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger, who refused to find those 11,780 votes for Trump in 2020, to Letitia James, the state attorney general of New York, who's currently prosecuting Trump, and late-night variety show hosts Stephen Colbert, Jimmy Kimmel, and Seth Meyers, who ridicule Trump on a nightly basis. Oh, and former President Barack Obama, of course. Now, it sounds like Trump wrote the talking points, as the list cites those in government and law enforcement agencies who were directly involved in the persecution of dissidents in the wake of the so-called storming of the Capitol, including Special Counsel Jack Smith, who is investigating Trump's hoarding of classified documents and his efforts to steal the 2020 election, and Lieutenant Michael Byrd, the Capitol police officer who shot insurrectionist Ashley Babbitt. Raffensperger, for one, isn't too bothered by the prospect of not getting to go see the wonders of Putin's Russia. He retweeted this from his chief aide, Gabriel Sterling. You all remember him, right? The tweet reads, "A great honor for Georgia Secretary of State Raffensperger. He's one of hundreds of Americans banned from Russia by Vladimir Putin. That means Brad is doing it right. He's in good company." And then the list is linked. Let's see if we can get a good look at... no, that's actually the end of it, as it turns out. Let's see who's in this... it's really extraordinary. It's no skin off of Putin's nose. It's not going to hurt him domestically in any way, and it doesn't hurt his international standing either, obviously. Oh, the list is in Russian, so that's not going to get me anywhere, although there are some transliterations here. I don't know if I know who all of the people are. Kara Abercrombie, Robert Abernathy, no idea here. Michael Abramowitz, Bruce Adams, Paloma Adams Allen. Anybody I recognize here? I was going to skim down. So far, no. But I'll continue on and see if we can figure out what's... anybody we know here? I'm going to keep looking down the list and see what we can come up with. No, and it's a long list. But okay, maybe that's something, if Joan feels like discussing it, she'll know the highlights of it. And if there are any other names, although, she provided quite a few as it is. So maybe those are the highlights, as it were. Okay, time to play our music and get the hell out of here and take our break, and we'll see what comes next in the... Oh, look at this. Here we go. This will be very interesting to Kagro in the Morning listeners, I'm sure. Banned from Russia, Scott Anderson. Now, I don't think that's our Scott Anderson, but if your middle initial is R, by the way, Scott, you're banned from Russia. I wouldn't have guessed that, and I imagine it's probably another one. It's a fairly common name at that, but just don't try to go. I would stay away. Hi everybody, it's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Then send the file to me at kgrox@gmail.com, and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com. Okay, well, welcome back everybody to the Kagro in the Morning Show. As we coming out, we have the ringy-dingy signal here from Joan. Hey, good morning, Joan. How you doing?
Good morning. I got in just in the nick of time.
Yeah, and make it exciting to show all the crazy things that can happen in producing a show live. So everything's fine. Just under the wire, I guess, or maybe right over the wire, but we're okay with it either way. I'm looking over this list of people banned from Russia that you were writing about the other day, and I don't know. Did you take a look at? The list is in Russian, but who did you see that was highlights?
I did not take a deeper look at the list.
All right. It's called out in some of the stories.
And I moved on, but it was really interesting.
Yeah, it's a weird thing. Let me note for the record that C. Boyden Gray is on the list here. Okay. He's dead now, so that won't be a problem for him. I think he died yesterday, but not by falling out of a window in Kiev, as far as I'm aware. C. Boyden Gray, a Republican super jerk of a lawyer, quite honestly, so I'm not too broken up about the fact that he's dead, but I'm sure his family is. So we won't talk about him any further. But long time, somebody I've had a Google alert on for many years because of what a jackass he wasn't. And intimately wrapped up, by the way, in the George Mason University School of Law long-term project to screw the rest out of us, out of our constitutional rights, all at once, if possible.
Where did you find the list? Now I'm curious.
It was linked in your post, just sort of, like, as you said, it was a quick hit. You just threw it right to it. Now I'm concerned that you've linked me to a Russian site here. Yeah. So any problems that ensue, I think probably, come from that. But yeah, I'm looking through it and there's a bunch of names. They actually refer to him by his full name, although they reversed the C and the Boyden. We know him as C. Boyden Gray. Here he's listed as Boyden Cleland Gray. I guess he's Cleland Boyden Gray. But, the Russians, they reverse all sorts of things. But yeah, there's a weird list. And I don't know who the rest of the people are, but there's I guess if you're banning, Jimmy Kimmel, I think it's pretty clear that, this is just favors to Trump, period. So, I don't know whether the rest of the list is anybody that the Russians have legitimate grievances against, but maybe there's just nothing
Ryan
legitimate.
Williams.
Okay. Why not?
Why not?
I mean,
not in a job anymore, but is he doing a job? Does he have a job? Where's he at?
I don't know. I guess we could look it up, but let's see. There's some names in here that are like, that guy is vaguely familiar. Who is it? And by the way, I'm not really sure why would they ban C. Boyden Gray? He's, a Republican activist, but.
But why J.D. Vance?
Oh, that's a good question. I wonder whether you could say, I'm going to burnish my, credentials some. Would you please put me on the list? I'll pay you for it.
Plenty of Soros-connected folks.
Okay.
The Open Society Foundation is Soros.
Yeah. I see. I could imagine that they would do that.
Freedom House, I think, is.
Okay. They typically are, critical of the regime.
Right.
There. Well,
Rand is not. Two people from Rand.
I would imagine they want to keep
the NGO Center for Naval Analysis. I don't know. I don't. It's really an interesting.
It is, and some of it's some oldies hits. Richard Clark.
It's like they just Googled.
Yeah, maybe that's all it was.
For NGOs
or Trump Googled. Give me a list if you want to ban people. All right.
I mean, there are plenty of Trump people. Trump's not going to care about.
Tom Kane Jr. I mean, all right. I don't know. Maybe that's a thing too. Like I was saying, speculating for JD Vance. I need to look like I'm not in the Trump Putin pocket. So could you put me on there as a favor? Like, Tom Kane Jr. He's pretty Trumpy. I don't know what. All right. There's a bunch of other people that just, it's quite a list. And I guess I'm only halfway through it. And it's pretty weird. And if you ever wanted to know how your name is spelt in Cyrillic, you can look, because we're all banned too, probably. I don't know. Somewhere along the line. Okay, so what's going on? Otherwise, I thought that was an interesting quick hit. Just a weird thing. And generally evidence that, it's Putin's a non-serious person to begin with, except he's just super dangerous. Mm-hmm. And that Donald Trump is essentially in Putin's pocket, and this is, I don't know, somehow a pat on the back or a favor to Trump, who's not even in power, just I don't know what, trying to, I guess it's free publicity, and Trump keeps talking up Putin, whether he ever is treated as a serious candidate and actually wins or comes close or gets the nomination. Free PR for Putin. I don't know what else to make of it.
I don't either.
Okay.
It's bizarre.
Yeah.
It's bizarre.
All right. Well, we should note for the record that it's happening, because it's crazy. And, there's a few others here. Bob Menendez. There we go. Yeah. Judith Miller. All right.
Okay.
Keep going, I guess. This is really interesting. Georgette Mossbacher. Wow. This is fun in a way. It's irrelevant, but it's Rachel Maddow.
Yeah, yeah.
That's to be expected, I guess.
All of the late night talk show hosts.
Yeah.
Colbert,
okay.
Jimmy Kimmel, and the other one.
Yeah, all right. Well, again, if you're on after 9 p.m., you're banned.
Joe Scarborough.
It's very late in Russia.
It's sort of a who's who of even people we don't know.
Yeah.
People from General Dynamics.
Oh.
Okay. Why not?
It's very exciting.
It says General Dynamics, I don't know, do they have weapons in Ukraine?
Maybe. Yeah, that's as good as guess as anything.
It's a very,
Penny Pritzker.
very bizarre list. I really would like to know how they compiled this one. Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, it was compiled with all the care of a pardon list from the Trump administration, essentially.
Yes.
So,
but, that's the obvious part. But,
Heather Cox Richardson.
Josh Shapiro, the governor of Pennsylvania.
He was going next week, I'm sure.
Yes. It's just so random, some of it.
Okay. Well, so in the meantime, debt ceiling. I think we covered most of the latest developments, but perhaps, I don't know, if there's anything more you would like to say, certainly, we're open to it, but by no means trying to avoid it. But I think it's largely the same as last week. Things are stalled. Everybody knows that catastrophe awaits, and now we're only debating, I guess, as Ezra Klein did, whether it's better to hand the catastrophe to the Supreme Court or suffer the catastrophe at the hands of the House of Representatives.
Yeah, hand this catastrophe to the Supreme Court. I mean, I don't. Yeah, they've gone nutso, but they're not going to go that nutso.
Okay.
Gorsuch wouldn't.
I mean,
and I don't think Kavanaugh would either. Nor do I think Barrett would. I really do think that the three Trumpies would look at that and say, we're going to be here for a really, really, really long time.
If there's a country
in our name.
Yeah. I mean, I think they would be afraid of it. The positions that they hold kind of, they sort of disappear if the world economy collapses. I mean, we may still pretend there's a Supreme Court. I don't know. But, if we're all camping out by the fires,
Yeah.
Like those guys in the New Yorker cartoon.
That's a bet I take any day.
Yeah. I mean, especially if the alternative is, would I rather have Neil Gorsuch and company, try to persuade one of their colleagues not to tip the balance to the super crazy, or would I rather say, you know what, Marjorie Taylor Greene, you put it together for me?
Yeah.
I mean, Gorsuch. Yes.
And I don't know if you saw the reporting out of the conference meeting this morning, but the Freedom Caucus got to McCarthy again, and he's saying, no, we don't have any agreement. We're not going to have any agreement. My way or the highway, the Freedom Caucus way or the highway. And that's pretty much it. So, Biden keeps giving, they keep saying no, and they keep adding more stuff. Like now they want their border bill attached. The Freedom Caucus does, Chip Roy.
Okay.
The bill that Biden says he's going to veto. Well, no, we have to have it too. I mean, he keeps saying, okay, spending freeze. Nope, not enough. And by the way, we need this too. And these negotiations that are not actual negotiations on the debt ceiling.
Yes.
Yeah. The Biden we all feared showed up for the worst possible fight.
Okay.
Or, conciliation.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. I guess we wait until it's done. But to the extent that we think we can influence things or push in a different direction, I guess you can't just sit around waiting for it to be done. But
all we can do is keep pushing, and it's getting very frustrating. Yes,
it is. I keep distracting myself with this list.
This should not be a difficult constitutional question at all.
Yeah, I mean, I did see one of the more interesting pushbacks on it was, well, okay, I mean, there's an interesting, consumer level parallel, which I don't know if it really applies to, a nation with its own fiat currency, but the idea being, conservatives could reason that, the 14th Amendment says the validity of the debt shall not be questioned. But that's a different question from defaulting on that debt. If a consumer accrues $10,000 in debt and then defaults on it, we wouldn't say, the validity of the debt has been questioned. The validity of the debt is perfectly good. You owe $10,000. You just can't pay.
Yeah, but the United States is not a consumer.
Right. But that's for the people who think kitchen table, yada, yada, blah, blah, blah. Right. Yeah.
If I have to balance my checkbook.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, what? So, right. Yeah. I guess you could take the comparison further. If a consumer fails to pay his $10,000 debt, does the economy collapse? Is there no currency anymore? No. If the United States government just says, the whole basis for value of those pieces of paper is out the window, that's a different thing. It doesn't really stand up to comparison to, one guy didn't pay his debt, but what about all the other thousands of debtors? Oh, they're paying. So it's good. What if every debtor stopped paying? Wouldn't that be questioning the validity of debt in general? You could argue no, but the effect is yes. Nobody's paying. There's zero money coming in, and the creditors can't pay any of their debts. And the debtors are walking because there's no way to get them because, the justice system we pay for to go after them isn't getting paid either. It is different.
It is different.
Okay. So, by the way, I think a lot more of this list is dead. I don't
see a way out of this without further serious damage. And damage is already happening. There's a story in the Washington Post yesterday that I'm going to follow up on today about small businesses who have contracts with the federal government are already losing business, are already uncertain what they're going to be able to do going forward. So it already is having an impact.
Yeah, I can
grocery
imagine.
Stores say, we've seen a lot of people stocking up on chicken and canned meats because they see what's coming. The ripple effects are extreme.
Yes.
Really extreme. If this happens, nobody is going to be spared from the fallout because jobs are going to be lost. Something like 750,000 jobs. Moody thinks. Suggests. I think it's going to be more than that. Wait, no, it was 780,000 jobs, I believe, no.
So that's just pandemic without the masks.
Numbers are in my head, floating around, confusing me. It's bad. It's just bad. Whatever happens is going to be bad.
All right. So now I know this afternoon after the show, everybody should go shopping. Don't go too crazy, but
fill up your freezer.
Yeah.
What the hell? If you
I just emptied it.
If you can schedule an elective surgery and particularly if you're on Medicare.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Yet if you are on Medicare, get everything done in the next week that you can.
Right. I guess so. My goodness. Well, I guess that's decent advice. Good for the economy for so long as it exists.
Right.
So we have a week of up numbers.
Extrapolate out. And even with the cuts that the Republicans want, and they are demanding cuts, Biden says, okay, we'll freeze spending. Nope, you got to cut spending. Mm-hmm. Because that means cutting spending. They're ignoring the fact that 5% inflation means that 2022 spending levels are a cut in 2024.
Right. True. And it was always a cut even in absolute terms, but inflation is going to make it that much worse.
And, a freeze for 2 years would not be so great either.
No. And don't think you're going to escape to Russia either because you're banned.
Medicare reimbursements being delayed, perhaps.
Yes, maybe.
So, are we going to see providers dropping Medicare and Medicaid patients?
Yeah.
Because they can't get paid on time. And this is best case scenario, and the cuts that the Republicans want happen. The Social Security Administration, they always say we're not touching Social Security, Medicare, or lately now veterans, which means that makes the rest of the cuts that much larger. Mm-hmm. Oh, and border security. We're not going to cut border security. So if you hold defense, Medicare, Social Security, border security, veterans out of the mix of cuts, everything else has to be cut so much more drastically. Yeah. And it will trickle down to things like cutting staff at the Centers for Medicaid and Medicare, cutting the staff at the Social Security Administration, cutting the staff at the VA. It means delays. It means more confusion for people trying to get benefits, trying to put through appeals on disability denials. Mm-hmm. And it means cuts in food stamps, which means cuts eventually trickling down to grocery store workers. Fewer people spending money in the grocery store means less profit for the grocery store owner.
Right, true.
And fewer people able to work there. Housing, which is already in crisis in the United States, with cuts to housing assistance, the schlubs out there managing apartment buildings that are subsidized.
Yes.
Could lose their jobs.
That's true.
It trickles down
really
in every area. Well, and then, of course, for the rich people, for the well-off, for the middle class who own stocks, it's not good either.
Oh, right.
It's a lot of losses. They might only be on paper, but it's still money, and it's still a big loss. Yeah.
And, if things, at the extremes, of course, I know, ultra-rich people probably figure, well, it may cost a lot, but I'm sitting on a big pile of money. But getting people to, perform services for you for money that might not be worth anything, I don't know how well that works. Or money that is certainly worth a lot less due to, perhaps hyperinflation as a result of all of this. I need a wheelbarrow full of cash in order to wash your Lamborghini or whatever the hell you're asking me to do.
I want to be clear about this. This happens with the cuts that the Republicans want to, and even the freeze that Biden is talking about is not going to be as drastic if it ends up just being the freeze Biden's talking about, but it's still going to be painful. Yeah. It's still going to be, and which of course is why he should not be negotiating this and why we should look for the alternative like the coin.
Yeah. I mean, it is an interesting. It's. I guess
was suggesting with the coin, Dark Brandon. No, Mark said put Dark Brandon on the reverse. Hunter said put Jesus riding the dinosaur on the front.
Nobody. I guess her moment passed, but like a week or two ago, I said Eugene Carroll should be on the coin, just for fun. But I guess.
Well, her moment has not passed.
I mean, for coinage.
She's gone back to the judge and said, hey, he's still at it.
Right. No, I mean, her court case continues. But, the moment at which everybody would have said, yeah, put her on the coin, I think, has come and gone. But I don't know. Maybe she wins further damages and sticks them for $1 billion. And then in which case, maybe we do it. But, the coin thing, I mean, that would be exciting and fun.
The coin thing would be a great fun thing, but the constitutional argument I think is the strongest and really the way to do it.
I think so, and the more likely of them, and again, I just find it's hard to say to be cavalier and say I think it's a good bet that the Supreme Court won't do the things that they're usually doing, because we do see them do an awful lot of really stupid, illogical, a-precedential things, but this one is shooting themselves in their own feet. My money supply drops. Right. And everybody knows who did it, and now we know exactly where to lay the blame, and although they can't be held responsible electorally, it's just the end of the court. They're so close as it is. Everybody's every day writing about this court has lost all of, or is about to lose all of its credibility.
Well, and that's an important point in seeing how the court is reacting to some things, like on the abortion pill. They're being pretty cautious on the abortion pill. I think that all of the attention to the ethics and all of the other problems of the legitimacy of the court is tempering their actions.
Yeah.
I think they're being more careful. Like, the putting off the independent state legislature whack job theory.
Yeah.
They're not ready to go there. The gun case that came up last week, where there's a challenge to an assault rifle ban in Illinois, and they decided to wait on that. They didn't go and slap an injunction down on Illinois to ban the ban.
Okay. So they are feeling
when it comes through to them, if they didn't do it from the shadow docket. So when it comes to them in regular order, when it's a regular case they take, undoubtedly they will ban the ban. But for now, they're not acting from the shadow docket, which is not what this court had been doing a year and a half ago.
Yes. They thought they had a freer hand then.
So I think it's a much, much safer bet to take this to the court and put it on their heads.
Yeah. Well, certainly anything safer than
because this Republican group, and they've got Trump pushing them now, saying default.
Right.
They're fine defaulting. They will absolutely, and there's a core of at least 30 of them who say, we can default. Yes. It'll be okay.
Yeah, and it's kind of hard to believe.
They're controlling McCarthy. McCarthy is not going to look for 30 Democrats to replace them.
No.
In a vote to suspend the debt ceiling.
Yeah, and maybe not even after he fails to get something together, because then they'll just say, all right, well, we're going to use our motion to vacate the chair. Although, you know what? If McCarthy were smart, oh well, what am I doing? He could say, is this really what you want to do? That next week we're going to do another 15, 17, 20 votes in the middle of this chaos, in the middle of default, and have nobody in the chair again?
I think that
they may say, yeah.
There's a chunk of them that would be absolutely fine with that.
And I guess that's where I, would differ with Ezra Klein and the others who say, well, don't risk putting it in the hands of the court, because the alternative is putting it in the hands of people. Well, will they really default? Would they really want that sort of chaos? I don't know. They told everybody horse paste was the answer to COVID and killed 1 million people. 1 million people. And no masks.
They are capable of anything.
Yeah.
And
this is scary.
They've got people arguing to them. Trump's former OMB director, his name just escaped me.
He's banned from Russia.
Russ Vought?
Oh,
Vaughn.
yeah, Vogt, right.
Vogt.
Or however he says it, but Vought.
Arguing that, the deficit is a much more serious concern than defaulting on our debts.
Oh.
So, cut that spending. Make sure that, little kids and poor people can't eat. Because deficit, but we can default on our debts.
They argue with confidence and conviction, but again, inject bleach, eat horse paste, masks don't work, it's against science, something, get rid of all vaccines. This is where they're coming from. They're out of their minds, and it makes it sound like in isolation if we just play the clip of them saying, we just don't think this is going to do any damage. Remember, these guys said, we just don't think this virus is going to do any damage. And 1% of the population will die from it, and who cares? It's just 1%. It's millions and millions of people. That's who you're negotiating with. And would I rather have Neil Gorsuch? Unfortunately, yes. I think I would.
Amy Coney Barrett, too.
Yeah.
She might be a whack job on religious stuff, but I think she's going to be okay with the nation paying its debts.
Yeah. It may have nothing to do with how the outcome works and whether or not they're good people, but I think I would people with high standardized test scores is who I want at this moment. It's maybe not, it's culturally biased. I understand that. I'm not giving them admission to college. But I just want some thinkers. Just a few.
Oh, you were talking about Marjorie Taylor Greene?
Yes.
She apparently just spent $100,000 on Kevin McCarthy's used ChapStick.
What? Is this...
This happened this morning in their conference meeting. They did a 15-minute fundraising auction using Kevin McCarthy's used ChapStick.
I don't know what this means.
And Marjorie Taylor Greene bid $100,000.
All right. I don't know that she has that money. Didn't she invest heavily in Truth Social or Trump Media LLC?
She has
money.
She has
lost
a
bunch of
money.
it there. I guess so. Not as much anymore. But she has ChapStick. I wouldn't use it.
She has Kevin McCarthy's ChapStick, which I don't even want to.
Yeah, this is like vaguely dirty, weird.
So yeah, we're a week away from default, and this is what they're doing.
So
again,
conference. I can't tell you I have much confidence in Neil Gorsuch or anything, but he's not this
more
crazy.
Than in the people who do that.
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, right. Don't bid on used ChapStick. Really, that's something you should return. Quite honestly, if you've bought used ChapStick. But that's a blockbuster of a story, if you ask me. I would ban her from Russia now. And she's not on this list. I have looked up and down the list. And that's surprising. Kay Bailey Hutchison is on the list, which is weird.
It's cherry ChapStick.
Oh, well.
Critical
you didn't say that.
Yeah.
Oh, all right. I would have gone to 120 on that if I had known. It's a surprising story. You don't want the economy in that person's hands. Nothing could be clearer.
Not.
I thought she was just crazy, but then she said, I'm also an economics idiot as well. And just to prove it, I pay $100,000 for not even for new ChapStick, old stuff. Gosh. And boy, you know what? I hope he has herpes. So I don't know if she intends to use it. I don't know. But that would be a great way to take out a good portion of the house. And they don't believe in viruses anyway, so go for it. Use it, Marge.
Herpes would not take them out quickly enough. It's got to be something better.
They may have a weird simplex of it. I don't know. Anyway, thank you for that news, Joan. I am going to go vomit.
Welcome.
You should do the same, by all means. And we'll check in with you next week, and we'll see whether there's an outbreak on Marge's face.
Radio.com.
Thanks, Joan.
Later.
Wow.
Listening to Kagro in the morning with David Waldman.
All right, time for us now to hand things over to Justice Putnam, although what the hell he's going to do to top that, I have no idea. He's got some information planned for you on the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. On Harlan Crow, back in the news, he serves high tea from his Hitler teapot while lounging in his Garden of Evil. That's probably a true story, too. Stay tuned.